As European markets stopped US meat imports, the Meat Inspection Act was passed and it banned the sales of misbranded meat products and allowed for inspection of meat when shipped over state lines. The Clayton Antitrust Act introduced stronger antitrust legislation and exempted labor unions from the anti-monopoly restrictions. The 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. However, the amendment did not provide suffrage rights to women of color. The Espionage Act of 1917 prohibited any American citizen from interfering in the war effort or interfering with the draft system during World War I. The Emergency Quota Act reduced the immigration quota for every country to 2% of that nationality's population in the 1890 census and aimed at reducing Southern and Eastern European immigrants. The Glass-Steagall Banking Act created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which insured bank deposits and separated commercial banking from investment banking. The Agricultural Adjustment Act allowed the government to provide farmers with payments if they cut their crop production by half. The National Industry Recovery Act set up the NRA, which supervised fair trade codes and legalized collective bargaining. It also set up the PWA. The Emergency Relief Appropriation Act created the Works Progress Association, which employed more than 8 million people by creating public work projects. The Wagner Act protected workers' rights of bargaining collectively with employers and organizing in unions and set up the National Labor Relations Board.
These bills stated that America would provide the allies of the Union in World War II with food, oil, and material. The ABC-1 agreement between Britain and America stated that if America entered World War II, the two nations and other allies would plan their military strategies together. The Smith-Connolly Anti-Strike Act stated that the federal government would be able to cease and operate certain industries going through strikes that were important for war production. The FEPC was an executive order which stopped any racial discrimination in employment. The Executive Order 9981 was signed by President Truman and it desegregated the military. The Taft-Hartley Act was enacted by the 80th U.S. Congress above President Truman's veto. It essentially broke down labor unions and banned many strategies to help them organize. The Employment Act of 1947 gave the federal government the responsibility of improving employment rates in production and keeping inflation low. The GI Bill was created to soften the impact of 15 million men returning from World War II. It helped them to easily re-enter American life by providing them tuition for college and giving the loans. The Federal Highway Act of 1956 allowed for the construction of a massive highway stretching across America, which would help build national defense and facilitate transportation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 improved civil rights conditions in America. It banned discrimination from race, color, gender, and etc. in public facilities throughout America.
In Gorbachev attended conventions in Geneva, calls were made to reduce and remove nuclear weapons in Europe and near the Americas. This was known as the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. After the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, reasonable accommodations must be made by companies in public places for those with disabilities. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy made it so that those enlisted in the military are no longer required to disclose their gender to their supervisors. Reagan's assassination attempt, the Brady Bill was created. This bill made it so that in order to purchase a gun, you will need a permit and also required a background check. The Brady Bill is the North American Free Trade Agreement, which eliminated all tariffs on trade goods from the United States, Canada, and Mexico. This act cost many Americans their jobs as labor was cheaper outside the US. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act protected intellectual property on the internet. Many people, however, break this rule by downloading movies or TV shows off of the internet. It was shortly passed after 9/11. This allowed the government to search and tap phone calls. This also gave way to the government overcoming the Fourth Amendment, extending the Medicaid coverage to those just above the poverty line and being the most significant overhaul of the American healthcare system. The age to stay in a parent's plan until turning 26 years of age. Billions of dollars worth of sanctions relief if they were to open their nuclear facilities to inspections and halt their program thanks to the Iran nuclear deal.